Hey guys, it's Daniel. The following is from ex-Alice in Chains manager Susan Silver on LAYNE STALEY's drug addiction. This is from Grunge is Dead. Quote, "The Dirt record, the making of that record, started to be compromised. It took longer periods of time to get things done. It started to be undeniable. After Andy Wood died, there's this denial factor. And I was already deep in a struggle with my own brother, who was also a heroin addict. For me, this couldn't happen to someone else who hasn't gone down that road already, because they'll see this is where it leads. So I had a certain amount of denial that it was a problem with Layne in the beginning. And then it just became my life as the Dirt cycle unfolded. I spent more hours every single day focused on and dealing with heroin addiction than I did managing my client's career. It became a behemoth. I lost my brother to the battle, so it was all-consuming. It was a horror show so much of the time, which ultimately led to nothing except pure trauma on my part to see my own husband go down that road so many years later. It was shocking. By the beginning of the tour cycle with Dirt, it was something that I was dealing with every day. And through that cycle, there were many cancellations and incidences. But Layne never gave up hope. He was not a sneaky drug addict. He was open about his struggle. He tried so hard on numerous occasions to get clean, through rehabs, and was willing to talk with people about it. He was willing to talk to the press about it. He was really honest about it, often apologetic about it. It kept taking him down. The thing about Soundgarden and Alice, they had really clear musical direction within the group. What an outside producer or A&R person had to say about the music was irrelevant. It really just bounced off. In a sense, there wasn't any pressure from the outside like that. Internally, everyone had a pretty strong agreement as to what they liked. They were making some amazing music. Of course, however, by that time, a big part of Alice in Chains' focus and struggle was drug addiction. The Dog record in particular in 1995 really was painful putting together. It took 8 or 9 months, hours and hours of waiting for Layne to come out of the bathroom, days of waiting for him to show up at the studio. And through all those last years, he and I were really close. I kept telling him, "You don't have to do this. You have enough money to go and have a quiet life if that's what you want," with his longtime girlfriend Demery. "Just go and do what makes you happy. Don't do this if this is what's perpetuating your addiction." I didn't understand that it wasn't the music that was making him take his drugs. He had a disease, and it was getting worse. But I was always saying, "What do you want to do? We can stop." He'd say, "I want to keep going." In terms of music, I'm not talking about drugs. He wanted to keep creating and recording. It was a really painful session because it took so long. It was so horrifying to see him in that condition. Yet, when he was cognizant, he was the sweetest, bright-eyed guy you'd ever want to meet. To be in a meeting with him and have him fall asleep in front of you was gut-wrenching. As the timeline will show, we stopped. We stopped many times to say, "This isn't going to work. We can't keep doing this." Even if he says he wants to. It's just tearing everybody to shreds. He wouldn't answer the phone, wouldn't answer the door. Every once in a while, he'd let one guy in that had been friends with the Alice guys who ultimately worked in my office. I was one of the only people he would let in to see him and bring him things from the office. He was very much housebound. He came out for a recording session, and that was the last time I saw him. The session was supposed to be at 4 in the afternoon. He finally got there at midnight. And that's just the way it was with Layne. You go to pick him up, to take him somewhere, and the next thing you know, 4 hours have gone by. He could pull you into the world, shuffling around, getting somewhere over here, and then getting somewhere over there, doing something on the Game Boy, and then doing something on the TV. Days would go by. He came to that session. I hadn't seen him maybe since I went to his apartment in 1996 to tell him that his girlfriend died. I hardly recognized him. He looked different. He didn't look like himself anymore. But he had the same sparkling wit. Looking at him thinking, my goodness, he's physically changed, yet just as sweet, just as funny. Quoting lines from silly Nickelodeon at night TV shows. The news of his death was a phone call we all feared for years. No one had heard from him. And the people that we were in touch with to let us know that he was still okay hadn't heard from him. His little odd weekly habits had stopped. Sean got a call from one of those people and said, "I'm going over there and I'm going to kick the door. I have this sick feeling in my gut." I said, "Sean, we need to get his family involved. His stepdad and his mom." When he didn't answer the door or respond in any way, the police opened the door, and the rest is history. In 2006, Alice in Chains decided to take a brave step and go do what they love to do, play Alice in Chains songs. It took 4 years after Layne's death and 9 years after they had last played together to play again. So they did a benefit for CARE, for the tsunami victims of Southeast Asia that raised over $100,000. I said, why don't you go do something else? So, into the picture come Ann and Nancy Wilson again, who I really want to stress what incredible guidance they've given musicians in this community. In March 2006, Heart was doing a VH1 special, Decades Live. Usually they take classic rock musicians and bring new musicians to play one of each other's songs. And Ann and Nancy asked if Alice would like to play. So we all went out there, which for me was significant because it was 5 days after I had signed settlements with Chris. Went off to the East Coast with the gracious hosting of Ann and Nancy once again. I realized that it was okay. As much mental anguish as we had gone through, is it okay to go on without Layne? This mantra kept going through my head as I'm watching these guys rehearse. Choose to live, choose to live. They chose to live in what they love to do, play music. That was really inspiring. It gets to the point where they're going to do an Alice song during Heart's set, which is Rooster. Ann wanted William DuVall to sing. She did, all these years later, what Chris did for Eddie at the Moore Theater, when Mookie Baylock played for Alice in Chains and gave her blessing to William at that moment during the show. I know that it's really personal for me, but it was also a historic moment. That specific acknowledgement towards how things are now, that there's a history not to be forgotten and there's a history about to be made.